Board of Directors, we have two community members who are voting members on our Board of Directors. They are in the room, they are at the table, they vote, they are informed, they are up to speed, and they represent the community. They bring the community ideas to us. They take community content back to neighbors as well. Just I'm going to touch on sustainability and we'll wrap up here. Energy efficiency is super important to us. There are solar panels on top of all these buildings, on top of this building, as part of the community solar garden. There's a district energy and district heating and cooling system here. There are all the sanitary sewer that comes from all of the Cherry Creek Basin that's on its way flowing north to the Metro wastewater treatment plant. Actually has a lot of hot water in it. There's waste in there, yes, but there's a lot of hot water. We are heating and cooling 1.3 million square feet of new vertical construction with the waste thermal energy from 2 6-foot diameter sanitary sewer lines. It's the largest system in North America, and it saves the equivalent of 6.6 passenger vehicle miles for each year in carbon. Here's a little bit about the community solar garden. We collect power here, it goes back into the grid, and then it goes out to other uses, including subsidizing some of the low-income residents, and they're reducing their cost of power. I think it works. Oh yeah, composting. Everything gets composted. If it happens here on the campus, it goes into compost. We have a compost facility that's just firing up right now. It'll handle our campus, and then the community will also be able to bring materials in for composting here on the campus. I am. Thank you very much. And I only have one more thing to do, and I'm so glad that I remembered it, because I always forget to do this when I have a mic in my hand. Just to introduce Vince Gazette with the Gazette, who's going to now lead you into the rest of the evening's worth of activities. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brad. Great to be here. I hope I don't need to yell into that, do I? Thanks for being here. Thanks to our online audience for being here. The reason we're here tonight is because Denver has become one of the country's flashpoints in the debate over immigration. At last count, nearly 41,000 immigrants have arrived in the city in the last 16 months, and city officials have said the response this year will cost $90 million. To help come up with the money, the city has had to cut services to pay for the care of those immigrants. And meanwhile, Aurora, Colorado Springs, and other jurisdictions have adopted resolutions saying they cannot afford to spend money on this crisis. Coloradans now say this is the most important issue in the state, according to a recent poll. This is also something I think we all care about deeply, since all of us have been immigrants at one time or another. So thanks for being here, thanks to our audience online, and I'd like to jump right in and introduce our panelists. I'll go from your left to my right. First off, we have Violetta Chapman, Associate Dean for Community and Culture and Clinical Professor of Law at the University of Colorado Law School. Professor Chapman teaches the Immigration Defense Clinic at the law school. She and her students represent immigrant clients in a wide variety of legal proceedings in both state and federal court. The clinic also supports and defends immigrant students, asylum seekers, and families eligible for immigration benefits. Next, we have representing the Mayor's Office, Adam Paul. Adam Paul is the Director of Regional Affairs for the Office of the Denver Mayor. Mr. Paul previously served as the longtime mayor of Lakewood. He had also chaired the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which is made up of 39 mayors in the metro area. Paul is subbing tonight for the mayor, who was called away for an emergency with his fall. Next, we have DJ Summers. DJ Summers is Common Sense Institute's Director of Policy and Research. He oversees the stages of CSI's fellows and research staff, coordinates with partners, analyzes projects, and breaks down data findings for the public, legislators, and commercial leaders. DJ lives in Denver and is a classically trained pianist as well. Am I right? Next, we have Abe Layton. Abe Layton was elected Douglas County Commissioner representing District 1 in November 2018. He began his second term in January He currently serves as Vice Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Previously, Commissioner Layton served as the Douglas County Planning Commissioner for 2 terms and as the Douglas County Republican Party's first Vice Chair and Treasurer. As a lawyer, he specialized in land use and business. And last we have Mike Coffman, who was elected to serve as Mayor of Aurora in November 2019 and re-elected in 2023. He is a combat veteran that served in both the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps and was an Aurora small business owner for 17 years. Mayor Coffman served in the State House of Representatives, State Senate, and the U.S. House of Representatives, in addition to being elected Colorado State Treasurer and Secretary of State. Thanks for being here, all of you. Our moderators tonight are Luigi Del Porto, who's the editor of Colorado Politics in the Denver Gazette and a first-generation immigrant from the Philippines. Helping him will be Nico Brambilla, who's an award-winning reporter who has extensively covered the immigration crisis in Denver. Nico also covers education for the Denver Gazette. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Luigi, and let's jump right in.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, everybody. Just a quick reminder to everyone, if you can put your cell phones in silent mode or turn it off, but click on that airplane thing. That way we don't distract our panelists this evening. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate your time. So let us jump right in. I'd like to start with a softball question. I think it's apropos given the gravity of the subject. So a softball question for Adam. Adam, does the mayor believe the city has a moral responsibility, a moral obligation, if you will, to care for the immigrants who have arrived in Denver after crossing the southern border illegally? And if yes, how does that fit into his fiduciary responsibility to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars?
Thank you, Luigi, and I want to thank the Gazette as well as Colorado Politics for this opportunity, and send my best for Mayor Johnston, who is really sorry that he could not be here tonight. And Brad, thank you for the incredible presentation, a lot of wonderful things happening here.
Adam, sorry, excuse me, can you bring the mic closer to you?
Absolutely. So
Thank you.
what I would say to answer your question is absolutely there is a moral obligation that I believe Mayor Johnston feels to help not only newcomers, but to help everybody in the city that he was elected to represent. And so it's quite a challenging situation when you're tasked with what is that balance, right? And I think what I would harken back to is he believes that it's a city that is caring, a city that can lift up all people, and this is a challenge that we can solve, right? It's not unsolvable. And so what we've been dealt with, what he walked into from the first day of his administration was truly a crisis, one that Denver had never seen before. And so how do we come together and find ways to help those most in need and make sure that when we go to bed at night, we don't leave folks sleeping on the streets, whether you are unhoused, experiencing homelessness, or you're a newcomer to our community. And that's been the challenge we've been tasked with in the city and county of Denver, is how best we find ways to find that balance and truly serve everyone who's in our community.
Sir, so far the city of Denver has spent $70 million so far on this crisis. Expected to spend, or estimated to spend maybe $90 million this year. At one point, Mayor Johnston's estimate was as high as $180 million. So another softball question for you. If it is $180 million that the city of Denver was willing to spend at one point, does that mean that the city of Denver actually can do without $180 million? Meaning to say that's fat in the state and the city budget. And if so, would the city be then willing to give that money back to taxpayers next year if we don't have this crisis?
Well, I would say, Luigi, you're not really throwing softballs here, my friend. But I thank you for that. I'll try my best to answer you right. At the beginning of the year, when we were at our peak of 5,000 newcomers in our sheltering system, 10 locations operating, we were at 180 million. And looking at that could be the realization that we're faced with. We've since decompressed to under 1,000. We're in the 650 person range right now in sheltering, and so those numbers have been cut in half. But I can't speak to the question about the refund to the taxpayers, but again, I think this is the idea of understanding that these folks are here in our community, and how do we best serve those in need as well as our residents, our unhoused, our newcomers. Denver is a welcoming and a caring community, and we're tasked with a challenge that, absent the federal government, nobody's coming to help. And I think that's the spirit that this mayor leads with, is that piece of empathy. We're going to try to figure this out. We're going to solve it. It's not cheap, and that's why we've tried to find ways to move forward, to decompress, to look at unique opportunities to really lead the nation and how best to respond absent the federal government.
Thank you. Commissioner Layden, you've watched the city of Denver for, what, 16, 17 months now deal with this problem. You, along with the city of Aurora, have effectively said we can't afford to have immigrants come to our city, come to our county, come to our jurisdiction. What are you seeing when you survey, when you assess city of Denver's crisis?
Well, thank you for that question. First and foremost, I just want to thank all of my friends and colleagues on the panel here for engaging in this collaborative discussion. I think this is how we lead in Colorado, is through conversation, through diverse viewpoints. I also want to thank all the citizens that took the time out of their busy schedule to just come by and listen, as well as obviously Colorado Politics and Denver Gazette for hosting Colorado Conversation. You know, I'm a fifth-generation Coloradan. I was born in Denver. So the success of Denver is my success. And Adam has shown up a number of times to Metro Area County Commissioners, which represents over half the state's population, and I really appreciate both he and Mayor Johnson for the efforts. That said, I want to be really clear about my perspective. A welcome sign in a restaurant where there's no food and no seats, and by the way, you're going to freeze if you come in, is not compassionate. And as the founder and co-chair of the Douglas County Homeless Initiative, we've been working really hard, especially with our friends and colleagues in Aurora, to address the homelessness crisis. And with all due respect, what we heard from Mike Johnston is over $500 million have been spent to only see the homeless population go up 300%. Now, that's a different issue, but the point in time for Denver was 5,000. When we're looking at 40,000 Venezuelan migrants, that's twice the size of the city of Louisville. So for us, we're just trying to take a common sense perspective and recognize that those numbers are staggering. $180 million is a staggering number. We're really pleased that that's coming down to 90. I hope that continues to go down. But for us, we're not going to cut police services and recreational opportunities for youth and our other obligations in order to address a crisis that we didn't create.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said common sense solution or approach. Are you saying that the city of Denver's approach is not commonsensical?
No, it's not. I can say that as a Denver native, with all due respect to my friend and colleague. We got to take the sign down until we have a plan. And the welcome sign is saying, hey, we're a sanctuary city or county. And they're going to say, well, we're not a sanctuary city or county. But several years ago, they passed a series of ordinances and resolutions prohibiting folks from being able to cooperate with immigration enforcement. And those policies de facto made it a sanctuary city and county. So that's the big welcome sign. And now they're taking in more immigrants than any other city in the country. That's problematic for a place that doesn't have the resources to handle that.
I want to pull in the other panelists here, but Adam, I do want to give you the chance to respond if you want to.
Yeah, so certainly, and I want to just emphasize that all the cuts that were proposed, the service side cuts to our community, have been restored: recreation hours, DMV hours, and so we have made that a priority. And secondly, this notion of sanctuary city, and thank you, Commissioner, I do appreciate this dialogue because we do have a lot of things that we can come together and work on. I would say immigration reform is something that we all can get behind and understand that this is a need, that we need newcomers, that we need people to come to our country. And there's a way that we can do this. I think Denver's leading the way, and Mayor Johnston has that vision. But the sanctuary city type of status or idea is something that's never been implemented, it's never been documented in the city and county of Denver. In fact, ICE operates within our city. So they are here, they're operating, and there have been things that previous councils have said that we are a welcoming community, and we continue to be a welcoming community. We know that our communities of newcomers are entrepreneurial. We know that crime statistics don't prove out that there's higher levels of crime, And so these things, and I think some of these scare tactics can be really challenging for a community when really we're trying to help at the basic end of the day, trying to help human beings and figure that out. And I go back to the federal government. A lot of the folks who come to the city and county of Denver, they didn't choose the city and county of Denver. They're put on a bus, they're brought here, and then we're tasked with trying to figure out how do we help them be successful or move on to some sort of situation. 99% of people that come through or come across the border have had some sort of contact with the federal government. There has been some sort of screening. There has been a legal process put in place, and now we can disagree about what that process looks like. But we're not able to do that as a city and county of Denver to say this, that, or the other. We're here to just deal with the situation and try to help people the best we can. Knowing that, for the most part, if these newcomers are given that chance, they're going to succeed, they're going to thrive, and they're going to be the same people that built this neighborhood and all the wonderful neighborhoods throughout our country.
Thank you. Mayor Kaufman, Aurora passed a resolution affirming the city's quote-unquote land sanctuary status, asserting that your city, quote-unquote, does not currently have the financial capacity to fund new services related to the crisis. Your resolution also demands that nonprofits and municipalities should coordinate with your officials before bringing immigrants into your city. And it's very clear to me that you're signaling, don't bring them here. Is that a correct assumption? And if it is correct, is it working?
Well, first of all, let me say that there were some amendments to that toned part of it down in terms of other entities having to coordinate. We would have no ability to enforce that, so that was taken out. But two elements I think remained in. One was that no general fund monies be spent in support of the current waves of migrants. And so part of that is, Denver is a city and a county. Aurora's a municipality and not a county. And in fact, we're in 3 counties. And so human services are a function of county governments. And so we don't have those resources available to do that. And so a statement of an existing policy. We are getting some spillover from Denver. It is impacting our school district. We do have some nonprofits involved in the northwest part of the city in helping migrants, and I know there's legislation that was just passed, although only $2.5 million was appropriated, that will go directly to those nonprofits to provide assistance. The city of Aurora, and one thing that resolution did affirm is that the city of Aurora has never historically been a sanctuary city. State law has in fact changed that, and why we don't enforce immigration law. But we were sharing our data with federal agencies, and so I think that this through state legislation, has seized that.
Thank you. Professor Violetta, ma'am, you work directly with the immigrants that have come here. What are you hearing from them? You've heard from Adam, who said many of them, most of them, all of them, didn't really have a choice to come to Denver. Is that what you're hearing? And to the immigrants who have come here, what kinds of services are they getting?
Thank you for the question, and thanks to all of you for the conversation. I agree, it's a difficult one, but one that's really important to have. So I've been teaching in the immigration clinic at the law school for about 15 years, and we've worked primarily with immigrants who've been here for a really long time. We have about 11 million undocumented people that live in the United States, some of them for almost 30 years. They have children here, they've grown up here, they were deeply rooted in our communities. This semester, my students and I did spend time in Denver working with newly arriving migrants. The vast majority of them from Venezuela, some from Cuba, some from Haiti. And most of them were extraordinarily grateful for the assistance that was being proffered to them. The vast majority of them wish that they had never had to leave Venezuela and come here. They're not necessarily seeking to come and stay here forever. They would like some help while they are here, and that's one of the fundamental ideals of this country, is that we welcome those who are in need and who are seeking protection or assistance in some way from this country. And I'm glad that we've been able to do it. I'm certainly glad that that Denver has taken that role. And certainly the issue with migrants being bused from Texas and Florida, that was such a challenging situation. And certainly I didn't, I don't think anybody liked to hear that people were being lied to and put on buses and told where, not told where they were going. But I do think it was an important moment for those of us who do not live in border states to understand what border states like Florida and Texas are dealing with. It's very, very challenging. And the reality is that, our immigration system, and I tell my students this all the time, we have an extraordinary amount of unlawful migration to the United States because we have very few ways for people to come here lawfully. And that's why we still have 11 million undocumented people who've been here for so long, because there are very, very few ways for people to be able to normalize their status. So we're dealing with this recent influx of folks who come. Most of them are destitute, essentially, right? They don't have any money, and they need work authorization because they would like to work lawfully. Denver certainly has, and Colorado has labor needs. We would like to be able to hire folks. And, I was amazed at what I saw as USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, was on site and waiving the fee for work permits. I couldn't believe it. It was just amazing. And the students were like, we helped 100 people get a work permit today. And I said, I really want you to put this in context, because we have so many clients that we've been working with for years that have lived here for decades, and they've never even had the chance to apply for a work permit. That's really an indication of what is an extraordinarily outdated immigration system.
Now, to those immigrants who have come here through the legal process, if you will, they waited for their turn. They applied at the embassy. They went through the process of filing the paperwork. Many of them waited 2 years, 3 years, maybe even more. Why is it that it is, I guess, to be blunt about it, why can't the people that are coming from Venezuela go through the same process and wait the same amount of time and go through the paperwork, set up the interviews at the embassy, and come here so that when they cross the border, they're actually admissible as opposed to inadmissible?
Well, the Biden administration has done a remarkable job, I think, of really propping up our sponsorship program here in the United States. And that's to allow for any American or any person living in the United States, you don't actually have to be like a lawful permanent resident, to sponsor folks that are coming in. That process is difficult and not as nearly as well set up as it could be. And sometimes we have to absorb people quickly. I mean, the situation in Ukraine, for example, when Russia invaded, we had a sponsorship process, and that was an example of how it was that the United States could have an efficient, dignified, and fair process for people desperately needing assistance to come into the United States. I certainly wish we could extend that same process to people from other countries. And the Biden administration tried. We have a sponsorship process for folks from Venezuela and Cuba and Haiti to come in, but it's not nearly as well set up as it can be. And sometimes it doesn't work as well when they need immediate assistance and they need to flee rapidly. We do have a vetting process, as you said. We have people who are interviewing people at the border and having them come in and understanding at least some semblance of who they are. So we just, as I said, we don't have nearly as many lawful ways for people to enter, which is why so many people try to come unlawfully.
Thank you. DJ, the Common Sense Institute recently released a report analyzing which Denver departments would bear the brunt, if you will, the proposed cuts to Denver in order to help cobble together money to pay for the care of the immigrants. At one point you said this is starting to pinch where it matters, and quote unquote, it's no longer a pencil pushing exercise. What have you found out in this report?
What we found in this report was that...
Can you grab Commissioner Davies?
What we found in that report was of the proposed about 45 million in cuts that were being sought, about 17 million were coming from just 4 departments. And this was not any fancy math or anything like that. The deepest cuts were coming from the Denver Police Department, Denver Fire Department, from the Denver Sheriff's Office, and just from public safety in general, for about 17 million total.
I'm sorry, say that again?
For about 17 million total from public safety department's budgets.
I want to bring in Paul, Adam, my apologies, Adam. You said that those cuts are really not going to affect, I can't remember how you phrased it, the public-facing services are not going to be affected. But of course, DMV has been affected. Parks and Rec have been affected. I mean, you did not, for example, you decided to forgo flower planting, for example. Can you explain to us where you're at with your cuts?
Yeah, and I want to emphasize something to build off of what the professor said, and that is that awareness that this has brought, and Mayor Johnston will say not one state, not one city should bear all of this burden. Again, that's absent of the federal government, that you're seeing non-coordinated entry in communities that are being unduly impacted. And so we started out with what we thought could be up to $100 million, $180 million worth of cuts. We're to about $90 million right now, and in that original phase, it was flowers, it was rec center hours, it was hours at the DMV. Those are fully restored at this point. And so we've looked internally to really understand how can we continue to provide the services that our community expects out of their local government and demands out of their local government. Public safety is key. So where can we ensure that we're still providing public safety, bringing on new public safety professionals, whether it's sheriffs, police, firefighters, but also is there other areas we can cut? And so we've looked internally for those cuts while making sure that the external piece is being restored.
Commissioner Latham, at one point you compared the immigration situation in the metro area to a bathtub overflowing with water, and arguing the call has been to spend money on towels and mops. You said, and I go, let's start by turning off the faucet. Until there's strong communications and messaging, it's made in Texas and at the border, that the Denver metro area is not a sanctuary area. Unfortunately, that faucet is going to continue to run. Sir, what do you think is the solution here?
Simply that. While we appreciate, $90 to $180 million being spent on towels to clean up a wet floor in a bathroom, common sense would dictate, turn off the faucet. Turn off the faucet first.
And how do you exactly do that?
It's very simple. The policies that Denver enacted that made it a sanctuary city and county need to be reversed. And Douglas County was one of the first counties in the entire state to proclaim that it is not a sanctuary county. Denver needs to do the same. Unless they have the money and resources to afford influx, I think we need to be intellectually honest about limited resources.
I think Professor, I think you wanted to say something. Jump in, man.
Yeah, I would just, it's important for us to know, and this is something I teach my students about the way it is that immigration law works. But the federal government has long claimed sole jurisdiction over immigration law and policy here in the United States, and the states have been preempted in many ways from trying to legislate in that space, and that's been frustrating, understandably so, because immigration touches all of us. But the federal government, the projection that the Biden administration has for the Department of Homeland Security's budget for 2025 is $108 billion. $108 billion. That is so much money. That is, I believe the mayor has talked directly with other mayors and President Biden about helping them defray some of these costs that the states have had. And I think that's utterly appropriate. We should be asking them. There are ways to decide about how it is that we're going to spend that money, and we should certainly be looking to the federal government to reimburse us or fund some of that, since they are continuing to claim that they have plenary power. With respect to the sanctuary jurisdictions, there's a number of jurisdictions across the country that have chosen to stop collaborating with immigration enforcement, state and local authorities, in large part because state and local authorities have very little decision-making power about how it is that people normalize their status, and they have felt very strongly on the safety, and this has played out in the years that this has happened, that their local communities are safer when local police are not collaborating with federal immigration authorities, that immigrants feel, or non-citizens feel like they can participate in their process, they can call the police if they are victims of crime, they can participate in crimes in cases as witnesses if they need to, and that's because local law enforcement is separate from immigration enforcement. We have absolutely no way, as the state of Colorado or the citizens here, to do anything about anyone's immigration status. We cannot change that. That is up to the federal government. And therefore, their immigration enforcement is their purview to pay for it. and they should be the ones who are enforcing it, and it does not make our communities safer to have local law enforcement collaborating with immigration authorities. It simply doesn't, because we have less people than collaborating and communicating and talking with our community.
Now, I want to ask Mayor Kaufman. Mayor, you were in Congress for quite some time, and what we've seen right now is the mayor of Denver going on TV, holding press conference with our U.S. senators, for example, a few of our Congress people, asking the federal government, asking the Biden administration, I mean, of the same party, for financial aid. That financial aid hasn't arrived yet. Maybe it will arrive at some point, but why do you think our congressional delegation has so far failed to give, persuade the federal government, if you will, to give Denver some financial help?
Well, first of all, I think, we desperately need comprehensive immigration reform. And I think both parties have failed the American people. But I will say that probably more on the Republican side this last time, as a Republican, of course, where you had a Senate compromise, that it would have made the situation better. Now, would not have done everything. I absolutely would not have done everything that I wanted. Probably not everything that both sides wanted, but would have improved the situation. And I think the reality, and it's no secret that President Trump put pressure on Senate and House Republicans not to vote. That he wants the situation as it is going into the election because he believes it helped. So I think that I was shocked in my years in Congress by how both parties use the issue. When I started in Congress in 2009, my first year, Democrats had supermajorities in the House and the Senate and never moved an immigration bill where they easily could have. And then I remember one day, a group of DACA students met with me, and they said, "Yeah, we just came from Nancy Pelosi's office," and she said, just don't work with the Republicans on this. We'll take care of it when we're in." Of course, nobody ever does, and so it's a great tragedy. But we have such a broken immigration system in so many ways. It's easy to come into the country illegally. I mean, physically it's kind of hard, but walking through this, but it's hard to come into the country legally. And if we don't have an immigration system that really, I think, benefits this economy, I think we should look like countries like Canada. But let me just, Aurora is one of the most diverse cities, I think it's the most diverse city in the state of Colorado, and the most diverse in the country, with 20% of our residents born outside the United States. We've had a 10-year integration plan, where we tapped into those entrepreneurial skills of immigrants, and we offer English classes, and we prepare them for citizenship tests and things like that. But the situation right now is overwhelming. It's a problem. And again, it's a product of a broken immigration system.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Nico. Nico has a couple questions for you. Also, all softball questions.
I'm waiting for a softball.
Thanks so much for those of you that I've called and pestered on this issue for taking my call. And really enjoyed hearing some of the back and forth this evening, knowing that I don't have to write a story on this, so appreciate that. So almost a month ago, on April 10th, this is for you, Mr. Paul, the city announced it was changing its length of stay policy to just 72 hours, where families previously were able to stay up to 37 days, and single adults for 2 weeks. And when this took place, we had about 800 immigrants being sheltered. As of 11 a.m. this morning, we had nearly 600 immigrants being sheltered, although only 300 additional have come since April 10th. And so my question is how is this new policy working to reduce the cost of sheltering new arrivals, given most of the reduction from the 5,000 happened prior to changing the 72-hour policy?
Thank you for that. And again, I think over these last few months, we've really been trying to learn how best to support our newcomers as well as balance the needs of our residents in the city and county of Denver. And so we've seen that drop, and we've had to make some challenging decisions to understand that not only are we faced with this influx of newcomers, also a regular set of unhoused folks, right? And if we're going to start to change our policies, how do we ensure that we're not just putting people back out on the streets while we're trying to bring folks in from the streets? And so, we keep an incredible amount of data and resources internally on this to make sure that we're educating newcomers, that we're telling them about what we can offer and what we can't offer. We're getting ready to roll out some new programs that are going to really enhance the most challenged of our set of folks is our asylum seekers who come here and really just want that opportunity to work, but we know that it's going to take them up to 6 months to be able to receive that work permit. So if you're here on TPS, CBP1, you can work tomorrow if you have that opportunity. So now we're focused on that opportunity to help these people, to serve them the best, and knowing that there's employers out there, and DJ does a great job of talking about this. There is a need for employees throughout not only this region, the state of Colorado, the United States of America. And if we can give these people the opportunity to work, to get those work permits, we know that they're going to be successful. And so as we continue to decompress, it's going to be a learning experience for us, understanding that when you arrive, these are the options that we can offer you and help you. We're going to continue to be compassionate and caring. We're going to work with our nonprofits who have been incredible. We couldn't have done this without our nonprofits and our faith-based community. And really try to educate and say, what is your plan? Do you have other resources throughout the metro area, throughout the state of Colorado, throughout the United States, and help them achieve that? And then again, get this new program rolling to get folks ready for work and really bring them around these wraparound services for success.
If I could just have a quick follow-up on that. So when do you anticipate that we will see the numbers drop even more with the implementation of the 7-hour policy?
We don't control the numbers, right? We can certainly see influx, they ebb and flow. We certainly don't control the border. We don't control the buses. We had 140 buses show up in December. I think we were down to 20 buses in April. So we know that it goes up and down, and we're trying to prepare the best that we can. We never have an idea of what's really coming and what that flow would look like.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor and Mr. Commissioner's question is directed to either or both of you. Officials in El Paso, Texas have an unwritten rule against providing onward travel. This is an asterisk to what Governor Abbott is doing, but officials in El Paso, Texas do not provide onward travel. And the reason is because they noticed that it had the unintended consequence of drawing more people to the particular shelter that was giving out onward travel. Denver lawmakers have defended and doubled down on this practice, and I was wondering, from your perspective, what the regional impact is of this decision.
Well, I think Governor Abbott has targeted them. Well, it's targeted, I think about 4 major cities. I think New York, Chicago, Denver, and I can't remember if there's another one. But have historically been sanctuary cities. And so, the reality is there's an attraction to who's ever providing services. And we understand that, and that's the sad reality of the position that we're in.
Yeah, I would echo that. And, again, homelessness is an unrelated issue, but there's some contextual similarities. And on the panhandling side in Douglas County, it's almost completely dried up because we have a perspective around redirecting our generosity to nonprofits that can support as opposed to distributing resources at intersections, which is what's safe for the individual or the person in the vehicle. What the studies and the research has shown, and our expert navigators have provided us with, is that when you provide resources at a certain spot, it incentivizes more requests. So I think I'm hearing your question correctly, and I believe that is unfortunately the negative externality of providing a welcome sign and more services in the improper location.
So as a quick follow-up, would you say that despite your community's efforts to say we're not rolling out the welcome sign, the fact that Denver still has an impact on your communities?
Well, we had a kidnapping in April of this last year at a bus station. A 25-year-old man was kidnapped by 2 Venezuelan migrants. The difficulty, and one of the reasons we filed a lawsuit against the state, was for our local officials to be able to cooperate with immigration enforcement. With all due respect to the professor, I respect that opinion, but our sheriff's office, and our sheriff specifically, who's been in law enforcement for 30 years, has patently said, we need to have the ability to work with our federal counterparts, just to be able to have a sense of who's out there. Right now, we can't count or assess or get information because that coordination is prohibited.
So my final question, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that we do not enforce immigration law. As our police department does not enforce immigration law because of the fact that we want cooperation from those communities, and that's just the reality of it. Now, what we were denied by the state that we would like to continue doing is to share. We have a 72-hour detention facility that we can hold for 72 hours, and so obviously we can get somebody violent off the street and we've arrested them. Historically, I mean, up until the state changed the law, we could share that information in federal facilities, and it was up to them whether or not they wanted to pick that individual up, and we have lost that ability to do that. But what really worries me right now as a mayor is the fact that you have, I mean, desperate people do desperate things, and you have people coming up through the border, crossing illegally, being arrested, asking for asylum, being processed, given a court date that could be years out, and with no ability to get a work permit until I think for about 6 months into the country. And then they have to pay so much for that work permit. So, very as time elapses, is that going to lead to crime for people who's trying to survive?
Okay, if I could just switch gears here just a little bit. Mr. Paul, I was curious to know how landlords are being screened in the program to try to provide housing to immigrants that are here, and then what the steps the cities have taken to ensure the rights of immigrant renters are being protected.
Thank you for that. So we have a variety of nonprofits that are working on the location pieces to finding residency and working with the landlords privately on that screening piece. So that's something I don't think the city is really engaged in. And when it comes to citizenship, I think renters' rights would resonate, and their rights resonate whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen. And those same ordinances that are in place in the city and county of Denver would be afforded to anybody, no matter what their status is.
Has the city fielded any complaints related to this? And then I'm really curious, Professor, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what the professor said. We certainly are going to see complaints, and we want to ensure that people feel comfortable coming forward to talk about those complaints, whether it is a domestic situation, a criminal situation, or labor and wage theft, right? Making sure that people aren't being exposed or taken advantage of no matter who you are. So that's something that is really important to the city to know that no matter your status, you have the ability to come forth and talk about things that could be hurtful to you or your family.
Professor, has this risen on your radar at all? And I ask because we have heard from immigrants that have shared their leases with us, and some of the charges that they're being asked to pay are not included in the lease.
Right, I mean, I think it just harkens back to the truth, which is that our federal government makes it extraordinarily hard for immigrants to legally support themselves once they come to the U.S., even those that we've talked to at the border and we've vetted and we've allowed and been able to come in, we still make them wait an extraordinary amount of time in order to get work authorization, and that makes things really troubling for them and difficult for them. That being said, we also know, certainly my experience, and this has been documented across studies over the decades, which is that the undocumented immigrant population and the rates of crime are far lower than the rates of native US-born populations and their rates. That's been across the board, that's a fact. And certainly with the newly arriving migrants, the vast majority of them are families with small children and they're desperate to work. They are certainly not here to commit any crimes. Certainly, you know, the ones that are charged with those make all the news because everybody's talking about that, but I would hazard us against thinking that that represents most of them or at all. What we know is that the vast majority of them are seeking refuge, they desperately need assistance, and it would certainly be much better if our federal government would make it less difficult for them to be able to work lawfully. And that's another part of the federal government's sort of iron grip on immigration. If I had my druthers, they would loosen it, certainly with respect to work authorization, and allow for the states to have some space to issue their own work authorization. State employment matters have historically been left up to the states to decide. It's something that has been well within our local jurisdiction to manage in terms of what are the job qualifications for state jobs. And to the extent that we could work with the federal government, with whoever is going to be president next, our administration, to think about ways that the states could have a little bit more power with respect to this work authorization for non-citizens who are residing within their borders, that would ease a tremendous amount of the stress that comes along with being in a new country, maybe not understanding the language, and not having a way to lawfully support your families.
Just to reiterate, point taken about immigrants committing crime, but this question is actually coming from the other perspective about experiencing crime, in this case from landlords who might not be even-handed with them.
Certainly that's been an issue with immigrants who don't feel that they have a recourse with police, and they are less likely to report things to the police. You know, when I arrived in Boulder, our elected DA was Stan Garnett, and he was one of the first to begin prosecuting people for wage theft against folks who were taking advantage of immigrants who had little legal recourse. And he and now our elected District Attorney Mike Doherty is very much in favor of not having a relationship with immigration authorities that make it seem to our immigrant population that they are not safe by contacting local authorities.
DJ, I want to ask you a couple of questions. So you've heard this tension that we have when immigrants come here unlawfully, and they have to go through the process. It takes them about 6 months to get work authorization. That's a 6-month lag time. From your point of view, I want to ask you, would it be better if they come here, they arrive in Denver, the state has the ability to give them a work permit, which is what you heard from Professor Violetta. Is that what do you think of that idea?
The conversation here economically is legitimately about exactly that. It's about the speed at which incoming people can add to the economy, about the speed that they can enter the workforce. Now, economically speaking, more people are better for an economy. That's more people who are working, that's more people who are purchasing goods and services. That is economic fuel. Now, in Colorado, we have a specific set of issues that prevent that from happening. One, our native birth rate is below replacement level. We do not replenish our own workers. We have to have people come in from outside of Colorado's borders in order to replenish our working people. And until Coloradans begin having more children, that won't change. Now, whether they come from outside of our state border or outside of our national border is beside the point. We have to replenish those. So the steps that we need to take in order to get these economic contributors are the most important ones. We also have a very strange unemployment balance. We have 2 unfilled jobs in Colorado for every 1 unemployed person. So we do have available jobs. Now, all that being said, they are economic consequences. In the meantime, until they can work, we are spending that money at the city level. We have spent $70 million to date, projected $90 million, now that's just at the city level. We have also spent money at the healthcare level, we spent money at the education level, The last analysis that I did just about what public numbers were reported from area hospitals and what students had been matriculated into Denver area school districts was roughly about $170 million worth of provision services. We're working on fleshing those numbers out more as more becomes available. But the hard economic reality is that unless people are working, they cost money in the meantime. So the faster we can get them contributing to the economy, the better off we're going to be.
You mentioned that in Colorado we have 2 jobs open, I'm sorry, what?
2 unfilled jobs
2
for
unfilled
every
jobs,
one
right?
unemployed person.
For every one employed person. Now, obviously Colorado is known to be this gorgeous place with a really thriving high-tech sector. Is there a nuance between what those kinds of jobs are and the immigrants and their skills and whether they would be able to fill those jobs?
That's a great question. We don't have a lot of data on what skill set the newcomers have. And that would be a great question for Mr. Paul at some point, whether or not the city has been collecting any data. But largely, we're talking about economic projections and what the workforce is going to need in the future in terms of education, in terms of healthcare provision. A lot of those jobs are in healthcare and in education, whether that's a nurse level or a home care provider level. Those are a lot of the jobs that are coming on, as well as, like you said, aeronautics industry, things like that. Those are smaller numbers but greater economic output. So we're not exactly talking about those when we talk about the unfilled positions.
Got it. I do want to ask just a couple of questions from the audience that I've gotten. I think this question is for Adam. Considering the cuts to DMV, the rec center, city services, why were immigrants prioritized over taxpayers in Denver?
And if I could just real quick go back to one thing, which I think is really cool. We've put between 14 and 1,600 people through work authorization clinics this year, which then will allow them to get out there and get to work. And we are trying to figure out what skill set do you have, what did you do prior to coming here, and it runs the gamut from professionals to laborers to hairstylists, nurses, teachers. It's the whole gamut. But back to that, I don't think it was a prioritization. I think it was an understanding of how do we find some balance. And super frustrating because nobody wants to go to the DMV anyways. So I totally get that. That's probably the last place anybody wants to go. We're really trying to figure out where can we find some opportunities to find some savings. And I wouldn't say it was a prioritization at all. It was more of a balancing of how can we continue to recognize the needs of those that are here and those that are coming. And our mayor was elected by this community to make those types of decisions. We've had a very supportive city council that have worked hard to try to communicate that. And it has not been perfect. And maybe it could have been other choices, but these are where they landed. And I'll just say that they are restored and our rec center hours are restored.
Just one more really quick question. Will the immigrants be eligible to vote in 2024, 2025, so on and so forth? Professor, I think you know the answer to that.
No, they only citizens are able to vote in the United States of America.
Perfect. And I think I do want to ask you just a really quick question. Mayor Kaufman, what is the way forward here, sir? Really quickly. What is the way forward, you think?
Well, I think clearly comprehensive immigration reform that would, I think, normalize immigration in the United States, and that right now, I mean, the fact is that if you look at what political asylum was historically all about, it was about persecution. It's not about economic refugees, and so I think normalizing that part of immigration, as well as creating opportunities for more high-tech individuals to come in. Right now, I remember when I was in Congress, you had President Obama, and it's one of his State of the Union speeches said that for people, for foreign students graduating with advanced degrees, ought to be able to should be given a green card when they graduate to contribute to our economy. And so I think that policies to have more of a balanced approach to immigration is important, but it's hard to do it. I mean, when you have numbers that are so overwhelming. few areas.
Thank you. Commissioner? The same question for you, sir.
I appreciate that. You know, I'm a fifth-generation Coloradan and a Latino, the first person of color elected commissioner in Douglas County. And so for me, I am deeply sympathetic to those seeking asylum in our country. But I have a Venezuelan migrant in my district named Jaiber, who is someone who came here several years ago with his mom, and he had two uncles that were abducted and ultimately killed. His mom was almost abducted twice. But he is now legally authorized to work in Douglas County, and he's working as an Uber driver. When he first got here, people said, "Hey, where are you from?" Because he had a different accent. He'd say Venezuela, and he'd be like, "Great, welcome." Now he's getting a lot of scorn, harassment on some levels, and so it's really challenging for those that are legally here, that have went through a lot of headache to go through that process. I just want to say that I support legal immigration. I think the solution is this, and again, I applaud everyone here for having the community conversation, even on areas where we disagree. And I'm proud to say that we're collaborating and working with City and County of Denver on work authorization. We believe in that. But the first step is you have to pull back on sanctuary city and county. That's it, you're not, unless you have the resources to handle it.
Thank you. DJ?
Whatever the way forward is, it simply has to recognize the economic reality. Like I was saying earlier, we're at an economic crossroads where, on the one hand, there is economic contribution on the other side of that, pending work authorization. Before that, it costs money, and it's coming at a very poor time for Denver and for the Denver metro region and for Colorado as a whole. There is a kind of hard economic consequence to a perception of public safety, which has been a large American problem generally in the early 2020s, and in Denver in particular, where had some of the higher crime spikes, had some of the higher homelessness concentrations. Now that all plays into a larger perception across the country about what kind of place Denver, the Denver metro area is to work. Again, we have to import a lot of our workforce from somewhere else. This used to be a very, very desirable location to live in Colorado. Last year was the first year that we didn't have people move in. We experienced net migration that went downward, not upward, like it had in years before. Anecdotally and from some business organizations, we know that a big portion of that is the perception of public safety here in Colorado. There are businesses that have shut up their doors in Denver. There are businesses that have refused to move from California, and they've listed a few of those things generally as the reasons why they've either shut their businesses or refused to move them here. Is just that general perception of public safety. This does not take place in a vacuum in the meantime. It isn't just what the city spends or what hospitals spend, but broader economic consequences of the situation for economic development in the future. So whatever happens in the future needs to happen quickly and sharply.
I do want to give Adam the last word. So, Professor, go ahead, ma'am. Same question for you.
So with respect to fiscal impact of immigrants, so the existence of undocumented migrants in the United States is not new. I know this is like dominating the headlines, but undocumented people have lived in the United States for a long time, and people have been considering and studying the fiscal impacts of migration for a very long time. And the National Academy of Sciences has done major studies, the most recent one in 2017, which then the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank, has worked with and sort of expanded, and they have found across the board that the net impact, fiscal impact of undocumented immigrants in the United States is positive overall. And they're thinking about fiscal impact as the difference between the taxes that people pay versus and the benefits that people receive over a certain period of time. And what we know is that undocumented immigrants have been paying taxes in the United States for a very long time, despite the fact that they don't have work authorization or that they don't have a social security number. Our IRS system has set up a very easy way for them to receive an individual taxpayer ID number so that they can pay taxes, which they do. The Cato Institute agrees that we need new workers in the United States. We need new workers, not just in Colorado, but in lots of other places in this country. And the only way we will do that is if we bring in new people. normalizing and figuring out a way to normalize and reform immigration, as Mayor Kaufman has said. Our federal government has failed repeatedly to normalize the status even of those people who are the most sort of sympathetic, who are our DACA recipients or our dreamers. The DREAM Act has failed. It has been a bipartisan piece of legislation 19 times, and it has failed 19 times, which is why President Obama had to create the DACA program, which has never been perfect, since it never provided an immigration status, but it did provide a work authorization and a social security number, and it changed people's lives. But we also know that it's fragile, right? And DACA is now going to the Supreme Court, and it may lose. And at that point, we're going to have thousands of college graduates, of law school graduates, of doctors, accountants, who will suddenly lose their work authorization. And that's certainly going to have an economic impact in our country, and it's certainly something that we should be able to figure out. But our federal government has repeatedly failed to do so. So this is a conversation that I certainly want to continue to have. Absolutely, new migrants should be getting an access to work authorization, but what about the millions and millions of people who've been here so long without it?
Adam, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is these are human beings, right? These are grandmas, grandpas, moms, dads. I had an opportunity to visit a shelter last week with special needs children that walked over 2,000 miles to get here, right? And I think sometimes we lose track of that when we get stuck in the labeling of what is going on. And I think people should be very proud of Denver and the way that we've tried to move forward and be welcoming and honoring to not only the residents who are here, but those that are coming. And I'll tell you that the rest of the nation is looking to Denver now to say, how are you doing this? How are you engaging in things that the federal government should be doing and has failed to do? And we're willing to take a swing at it. And so we're going to continue to do that. And I thank the panel and all the folks that are here, but Mayor Johnston and the City Council are going to continue to move forward and find these opportunities and move people to success. It's that human piece that brings that vibrancy in the community that's willing to gamble on those who we know will bring vibrancy and benefit to our community. And to close with the question, is the opportunity for expedited work permits. Expedited hearings, right? Coming here and waiting 6, 7 years. We got to get this turned around right away, right? We need coordinated entry so we don't have certain people just picking and choosing where folks are going to go and where they're going to land, right? We talked about the Ukrainians and the Afghani newcomers. The full weight of the federal government behind them. You go to Chicago, you don't see Ukrainians sticking out on the streets because the federal government was helped to relocate and settle. So we know that this can be done. Mayor Johnston knows that this is solvable. And then lastly is the federal backfill, right? We talked about the dollars that the city and county of Denver has spent in other communities, whether you're a school district, whether you are a community in the mountains where you had almost 200 people show up and started living under a bridge before winter came, not knowing what winter was going to look like in that community. This will affect everybody throughout, and so we need those three things: expedited work permits, authorizations, the ability to have these hearings. We need a coordinated entry plan, and we need those federal dollars to flow back in for the backfill to help replace the dollars that have been spent in our communities.
And I think that's a good place to end. Professor, thank you so much. Adam, thank you for taking the time. DJ, Commissioner, Mayor, and to all of you who came in here and spent the afternoon with us, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll do this again.